makingascene.org brings you Transient Shaping, controlling punch without compression. You know, if you've ever just sat in front of your digital audio workstation, literally pulling your hair out because your tracks feel, well, just kind of lifeless, you're in exactly the right place today. We're going to look at a technique that honestly feels like a secret backdoor into professional mixing. We've all been there, right? It's that completely relatable home studio pain point. You hit a wall in your mix and realize something just isn't hitting hard enough. Your snare feels a bit soft, the kick drum is completely buried, or maybe that acoustic guitar just sounds kind of flat. Honestly, it feels like the drums are sitting behind a heavy wool blanket. So what's our first instinct? We reach straight for a compressor to fix it. We dial it in, really hoping for some magic, only to realize a few minutes later that it just completely crushed the life and the emotion right out of the track. It is so frustrating because you know the energy is in there somewhere, but the harder you try to squeeze it out, the further away it gets. You wanted punch, and, well, you got a pancake. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for transforming those muddy, lifeless tracks into professional, playlist-ready mixes. First, we'll look at the actual problem with compression. Then, what is a transient? After that, shaping versus compression, shaping in the mix, avoiding common mistakes, and finally, the indie artist advantage. So, Section 1, the problem with compression, why punch disappears. You know, while compression is an absolutely essential tool, it controls volume, adds weight, and glues things together, makingascene.org points out that it's often the exact reason your track's punch disappeared in the first place. Think of it like this. Using a compressor for every single dynamic problem in your mix, it's basically like trying to fix a piece of really delicate, fine furniture with a heavy hammer. I mean, you wouldn't swing a sledgehammer just to tighten up a loose screw, right? Sometimes you just don't need to smash the whole signal down based on a volume threshold. Sometimes you just need a precision screwdriver to make a tiny, specific adjustment that actually solves the problem without totally destroying the character of the sound. And well, that precision screwdriver? That's transient shaping. Moving right along to Section 2, what is a transient? The front edge of sound. To really understand exactly what we're manipulating here, we need to transition over to some foundational theory. It's super crucial we get this right before we start turning any knobs. A transient is essentially the first fast burst of energy at the very beginning of a sound. Makingascene.org uses this brilliant analogy for it. Imagine clapping your hands in an empty room. That first sharp, immediate crack of the clap, that right there is the transient. Or think of a guitar. It's the physical pick hitting the string right before the actual musical chord rings out. On a vocal, it's that hard consonant at the front of a word. It's basically that hard, immediate edge that tells your brain and your ears, hey, something just happened. Now, every sound you're going to manipulate can be broken down into two main phases. First up, there's the attack. Think of this as the front door of the sound. It's the rhythm, right? It's that initial crack or a click that tells the listener exactly where the beat is and how physically close the instrument feels to them. Then, second, there's the sustain. And this is the story after the hit. It's the tail, the bloom, maybe it's that low-end wash of a kick drum or the ringing of a snare shell echoing out into the room. And here's the beauty of it. A transient shaper allows you to control both of these elements completely independently. And that brings us right to Section 3, shaping versus compression, envelope versus loudness. This is where we introduce the massive paradigm shift that separates these two really powerful dynamic controllers. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the core difference in how these tools actually think. Over on the left, we've got compression. Compressors are volume or level-based. They kind of just sit there, waiting. They're basically saying, hey, when this signal gets louder than the threshold I've been given, I'm going to turn it down. They are purely reactive to loudness. But over on the right, transient shaping is envelope-based. A transient shaper says, I don't really care how loud this is. Let me look at the actual shape of the sound over time, and let me reshape that front attack and that back sustain. And what does that mean for us? It means a transient shaper can make a quiet snare hit and a really loud snare hit equally snappy, completely avoiding that unnatural pumping or grabbing side effect you so often get from a compressor. All right, let's shift gears from theory to some highly practical application with Section 4, shaping in the mix, practical application. So how do we actually use this precision screwdriver when we sit down to work? Here is a highly actionable 4-step workflow straight from makingascene.org. They specifically utilize the Fender Studio Pro 8 workflow here, but honestly, this truly applies to literally any digital audio workstation out there. Step 1, insert the shaper and just loop the thickest, busiest part of the song. Step 2, push the attack and the sustain way up until it sounds undeniably bad. I know it sounds crazy, but do it. And then back it off to find that perfect sweet spot. Step 3, level match the output. Now, this is the ultimate grown-up move in mixing. Seriously, if you don't level match, your ears are always going to be tricked into thinking that louder just means better. And finally, step 4, bypass the plugin and compare. You've always got to ask yourself, does this actually serve the song? Let's do a rapid-fire breakdown of how this actually impacts specific instruments. For a kick drum, you can add attack to really enhance that beat or click, so it punches right through those tiny phone speakers, and simultaneously, you can reduce the sustain to pull out that muddy, unnecessary boom. For a snare, oh man, you can add that glorious crack to the front end and dial back the sustain to dry out an ugly, smeared room tail. And for guitars, this is an absolute secret weapon. You can actually reduce the attack to magically soften scratchy acoustic guitar picks, or pull back the sustain on heavily distorted electric guitars to tighten up the rhythm so they stop washing over your entire mix. Now, if you're sitting there wondering exactly what tools to use, makingascene.org provided some really fantastic recommendations. If you're on a budget or you just want some free options to start out, definitely check out Flux Bittersweet. It's incredibly simple and effective, literally just a single knob. There's also Auburn Sounds Couture, which is great. Now, if you are ready to jump into pro-level processing, the SPL Transient Designer Plus is an absolute industry standard. Engineers have trusted it for years. And the Aventide Physion MK2, that one does some truly mind-blowing things by splitting the tonal and the transient information completely apart. Okay, we need to move to Section 5, avoiding common mistakes. Don't ruin the mix. Because look, even with these incredibly precise tools, there are standard pitfalls that can absolutely ruin a track if you aren't careful. There are a few key pitfalls you really have to watch out for. The first is just using way too much attack. I get it feels so exciting at first, but after like 3 minutes of listening, it creates this exhausting cartoon effect, where the listener literally feels like they're being repeatedly poked in the forehead. Not great. The second pitfall is killing all the sustain. Doing that just removes all the emotion, the resonance, and the reality right out of the instrument. Also, never shape in solo. You always have to hear how that new attack reacts with the other instruments in the track. Never skip your level matching. And probably most importantly, do not ignore a bad source recording. A plugin simply cannot save a poorly tuned drum or terrible microphone placement. The best shaping, that always starts at the source. And that brings us to our final section, Section 6, the Indie Artist Advantage. Build the new industry. Let's bring this explainer home by connecting these granular technical audio skills to the massive, big picture goals of your independent music career. So, the crucial point is this. Why does tweaking the attack on a snare drum actually matter to your career? Well, because better mixes lead directly to better translation. When your low end is tight and your transients are crystal clear, your song sounds incredible on massive club speakers, sure, but it also translates perfectly to tiny phone speakers, Spotify playlists, and those absolutely crucial licensing pitches for TV and film. Sonic clarity actively generates revenue opportunities, and it really helps you intimately connect with your fans in the new music industry. I want to share this really powerful thesis statement, sourced directly from makingascene.org. It says, punch is not about being loud. Punch is about being understood. Just let that sink in for a second. This is the ultimate paradigm shift for modern mixing. You really don't need to arbitrarily crush your master bus with a limiter just to be impactful. You just need to control the shape of the sound so your listener physically feels the emotion, exactly the way you intended. So I want to leave you with this final question. Are you ready to stop crushing your tracks and actually start shaping your own independent sound? The tools are right there in front of you. Go grab a transient shaper, load up a mix, and just start experimenting with the front door and the story after the hit. Make sure you check out the other great articles and resources on makingascene.org, the place the indie artist goes to build the new music industry.